Connection is about going toward the pain. I think resilience is founded on your ability to go toward the pain. All suffering can be experienced in a healthy container if we learn to do that in the right way. The answers that you seek are on the other side of what you want to feel least. I do believe that, and it's a very hard reality to swallow.
Welcome back to Connected and Uncensored. I am your host, Michaela Overman, and today we are joined by Mitch Wallis. He is a psychologist, author of Real Conversations, which we are going to delve in today, and also owner and CEO of Heart on My Sleeve, one of Australia's leading mental health charities. So before I jump into letting Mitch introduce himself properly, I wanted to give you guys a little bit of a snapshot of what we're going to chat about today. So the main message from today's podcast is going to be how to have real conversations.
Something I prepared earlier.
Yes. And I guess the difference between a real conversation and a transactional conversation. How to help somebody that you love or care about when they are having a tough time, and why we may be doing kind of the wrong things here and there when we are trying to support someone. So the most important thing I feel to remember from what I took out of Mitch's book especially is the fact that you said 30% of the time is all it takes to have healthy attachment with your child. If you are nurturing and approaching real conversation with your child 30% of the time. So same goes for romantic relationships and relationships in general. 1/3 of the time, you're nailing it. You do not have to strive to be perfect. And I wanted to kind of preface this podcast with that. So we're not here to learn how to be perfect communicators. We're not here how to, have the best, most perfect relationships, but instead how to do good enough conversation and how to make the biggest impact 1/3 of the time. Let's get into it. I would love for you to tell my audience a little bit about you and your story and what brings you.
Hello, my audience. It's Mitch. Mitch Wallis from Real Conversation. Mama Mick, it is so good to be here. And I'm someone that I hope the audience can relate to in some way, because I think emotions and pain are quite universal experiences. And I've struggled with mental illness for more than 2 decades. First diagnosed with OCD at 7 years old, when my mum saw me doing strange behaviors around the house, like touching light switches hundreds of times and blinking in certain patterns and praying out loud on repeat. And I still remember the day that the doctor said, there's something wrong with you, basically. And walking out the front of the office and looking up at my mum, my best friend, and asking her, why is my brain broken? And she burst out in tears. And for me, that was the defining moment of, holy shit, something is very wrong, and I need to put on a mask so as not to hurt the only thing that I love in the world. And so that's how I would go on to live for many years after that. No one would have any idea that something was clinically wrong inside me. And that's the 3rd time I said the word wrong, and I'm going to come to reconcile that that's not actually true. But that was the belief. Through my teenage years, had lots of friends, went out to parties, did well academically. After school, I was the youngest ever intern at Microsoft in Australia, by honor roll recipient at Sydney Uni for my commerce degree, by 25 global product manager, living in Seattle, working for Microsoft. And the dual path there was that whole time I was breaking more and more inside and holding this guilt that I wasn't enough, and the shame that, I was inherently flawed. Ultimately, it would take until breaking point for this to even start to get better, and for me to go from wrong to exactly right. And that happened in 2016, when it was just a function of enough pressure in the system, living away from home, being really busy at work, huge job, but more than anything, pretending is painful. It's the genesis of why I started Heart on My Sleeve, which you're now thankfully a part of. And I think it just there was so many years of putting on the brave face that the weight of that, I started to crumble beneath
Mm.
and had a massive mental breakdown, was on the verge of a psychosis, and had to throw in the towel and basically put my hands up and say, I can't get out of this. And I am so glad that it happened. And I, looking back on it, can attribute the reason that I'm not only alive today still, but thriving to two things that ultimately led to a, let's call it a third macro insight. The first is my mother's love. As you'll read in this book, the entire thing is devoted to our relationship and the fact that we could have real conversations. And it was having real conversations in the right moments that was my life raft. She, I have no idea how, without a degree in psychology, was able to not be transactional with me, which is the technology that I contrast against, and was able to hold such therapeutic space that made me turn away from the darkness when it was beckoning. The second thing was a YouTube video that in my darkest moment saved my life, of a guy in his bedroom telling his story, and him wearing his heart on his sleeve was the shattering of the membrane that I'd been living inside of, which was I am broken, I am wrong. And seeing myself in someone else was like fully like a mirror image. It was the first time that I thought, fuck, maybe it doesn't need to be like this anymore. Maybe I don't need to believe this. And that the power of understanding is like the steroids of healing. And so my mother's love is random guy Harris's story on YouTube, which inspired the movement. And third of all, which led me to this macro insight that I devote my entire career to. Every single book that I will go on to write, every talk that I give, every business that I'm involved with in psychology comes back to three words that I have tattooed around my neck: toward the pain. Toward the pain. I think that connection is about going toward the pain. I think resilience is founded on your ability to go toward the pain. Nervous system capacity and regulation is going toward the pain. And forming a therapeutic relationship with the pain, because it is the avoidance and denial of suffering that is suffering. Because all suffering can be experienced in a healthy container if we learn to do that in the right way. So that's a lot of psychology stuff, but I essentially, like in a very layperson's way, the answers that you seek are on the other side of what you want to feel least. I do believe that, and it's a very hard reality to swallow. So since leaving Microsoft and me sharing my story in 2017, which was my only goal after kind of leaving that old life behind, was to be Harris for one other person and end up trying to scale out the learnings that my mum gave me. My Facebook video went viral, reaching millions of people, and then lots of people started drawing and tattooing hearts in their arms, and started this movement, which is now 7 years old and is generating a ton of good work to reduce stigma in society and get people to speak up and seek help. And I'm super proud of that. I'm now a touring global speaker and work with Fortune 500 companies on over 4 continents. And it's crazy, living a life I never thought possible. And I think at the core of this discussion that I want to have with you today, Mick, is how do we give your listeners a couple of insights from that's taken, well, decades of pain, more than half a decade of research, so that in the next 30 to 60 minutes, they can walk away a different person by understanding that people aren't looking for your advice, they're looking for your care. Spoiler alert, that's pretty much the essence of the book.
And also how lucky you don't have to go through the 10 years of pain and all that to get this. Like, we're just going to give it to you. Phenomenal.
Something I prepared earlier.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I think, straight off the bat, being vulnerable and open like that is incredibly connecting. And I feel, yes, you're going to talk a lot about the tools and techniques and how to have good connecting conversations. But I guess at the crux of it is having those conversations with people that you feel safe and connected with. So relationships at the end of the day is, like you've said, the biggest predictor of good mental health.
Correct. Yeah. So the research says that the relationships, human connection, is the single greatest thing that will prevent suffering or mental illness. And it is the single greatest determinant of a happy life. So put a little bit of meat on that bone without getting too datery, when they analyzed cohorts of PTSD patients and they tried to work out is it the size of the traumatic event that they experience that would determine the suffering or symptomology later in life, or is it something else? It turns out that it's someone's attachment style and their ability to feel supported before, during, and after a traumatic event that was more of a determinant of the impact, which means that you literally don't need to create the circumstances of a perfect life, nor do you need to necessarily fix a problem in the outside world for it not to impact you. You just need to feel co-regulated and loved through it. And so for me, that was this ultimate Dr. Dan Brown's work where I was like, holy shit, this is so empowering to think that if we give people more tools, we can actually control far more than we think when it comes to getting people out of a bad life or a bad emotion. It's also the number one thing that leads to a good life in the absence of negativity. So when Harvard's longitudinal study on high quality living, what they showed more than any other factor, whether that be financial income, what country you're from, but what I find so interesting is we've never been more disconnected. Our relationships have never been in such low quality. We've never had higher suicide rates. So the book is kind of looking into a societal issue as much as it is a personal connection issue, which is, well, maybe we are conflating the word talking and connecting. And we are. We think that talking is connecting. It's just not. Talking comes from the mouth. Connecting comes from the heart. Talking is a transaction of information. Connecting is the sharing of an experience. Talking is trying to get someone out of pain. Connecting is meeting someone in their pain. So first we need to define, well, shit, if human relationships are the goal, but connecting is the therapeutic part, how do we do that in the right way? And I believe the technology to do that is a real conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love for you to help the viewers kind of understand the difference between real conversation and transactional conversation. I mean, saying that one is just talking, the other comes from the heart. Do you feel like there's any other defining difference between helping someone feel like I'm genuinely here for this conversation? I want to be in a real tough conversation with you.
Yeah. So both are necessary, right? But it's understand when to use which instrument. So a transactional conversation, i.e., what we're used to doing, which is like answering people's questions, delivering them information, blah, 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 is good when something is practical. So if I asked you, Mick, where's the bathroom in the house? And you asked me, how do you feel about bathrooms? Let's feel into that. I'd be like, this is fucking psychotic, right? But, or if my team member said, how do I turn on my computer? Or if they said, what's the forecast on the P&L for the next quarter? I'm going to be transactional with them because that is the appropriate tool. Just like how if I was installing a light bulb, I might need a certain tool, which is different to putting up a cement rendered brick wall. But to continue that analogy, to think that the tool I can use on the light bulb, the transaction, will fit everything I need to build a house, is expecting that talking will solve every human relationship issue. It's just not going to. So when practical happens, give information and answer from your head. But if someone comes to you and says, you know, I want to die, or, you know, in a much more realistic sense, I'm feeling really excluded. If you give them information, you're going to not only lack any help, you're probably going to make them feel worse. Because what they're not coming to you for is information, they're coming to you for care. And if you don't recognize that you're now in an emotional based thing, not a practical based thing, but you use a practical tool on an emotional problem, there's going to be a misalignment of outcomes. So real conversations is helping people identify, well, is this practical or emotional? And then if emotional, what do I need to do different? Just like how I would need to change tools for a different part of constructing the house. And, you know, part of that is like, if my dad's just died, God forbid, helping me plan the funeral is not what I need. It's helping me relive his memory in a safe way is what I need. And so asking me, what do you miss about him most? In all the ironies, which is what I'm trying to encourage people to do in real conversations, is go toward the pain. You know, your whole body is going to tell you that's going to make them feel worse. And that's why I call it a counterintuitive approach to redefining connection, is that If you feel like you're rubbing salt in the wound when you're helping
Yeah.
someone emotionally, you're in the right place.
Mm.
If it's not stinging, you're not having a real conversation,
Mm.
you're in a transactional conversation.
Yeah.
And just because I know that this is a long-winded way of answering your point, but it's so topical. Yesterday, I was in a coaching session for real conversation participants that have gone through my program. And this person used this perfect example where I'm like, I'm going to talk about this tomorrow on the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, right now, when I go into work, the place that I usually come and sit, someone is now sitting there. And so I've kind of had to change where my locker is at work, pick up my things and go to a different part of the office floor. And I spoke to my boss about it, and he just said, just go find a new seat. It's not a big deal. Now, what started as a practical thing, a lot of people don't realize probably their number one mistake is something that starts practical actually often merges emotional. What we're talking about in that conversation with her is not seating, it's inclusion. What we're in a belonging conversation now around where she feels rejected because people aren't caring about her being around and how it might impact her not feeling like the time she spends at work, which is more time with her family and friends, she's not being valued or known. So, so often in life, we think we're in practical, the seat, but we're actually in emotional, which is being seen. The dishes, it's never about the dishes. You think you're in practical, it's actually about a respect conversation you're in. So that's another thing I'm trying to get people to understand is you're in an emotional conversation way more than you think, which means that you have to master the art of being real.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel from a parent perspective, but it's the same when supporting friends and romantic partners as well, understanding that these skills, like you mentioned earlier, learning them means that it doesn't really matter what the external thing is that is happening, that is upsetting this person or hurting this person. When you are sitting with them in the mud, as you say in the book, you are going to help them build the resilience to handle. Right now, it might be my locker got moved, my seat at work is different. In 1 year, it might be this person broke up with me. Whatever the situation is externally that is causing this person pain, it will shift. But having somebody sit with them means that they feel co-regulated, they feel supported, they feel safe, they feel seen. And I think from a parenting standpoint, we really want to get rid of that pain ASAP. And we really want to be like, well, why don't you just see if your locker can move back there? Or why don't you, talking to her yesterday, you may have tried to come up with those solutions.
No.
But the more we can take the approach, of going, I guess a good example is like bullying at school. My sister said her son was dealing with some people at school that were making him feel really upset. And her solution is like, how do I get in there and talk to the kid or talk to the teacher or, tell him to sit somewhere else? And I said, instead, if when you're at home, you sit with him and you help him feel like at home he is safe, he is seen, he is heard, he is loved, whatever the external situation is that is coming up, he'll handle it.
Yeah, I'm going to stare down the barrel and say this one because it's super important. When you're co-regulating with someone and by doing so, you're giving them solutions, thinking that you're helping, you are starving them of their own resilience. You are starving someone of their resilience when you give them solutions. You're showing to them that you don't actually understand what's affecting them because it's not the practical surface level part, it's the meaning that they've attributed to it. And you're basically saying, perhaps, you're a broken object in need of repair, so here's a Band-Aid, as opposed to, I see you, I hear you. Because 90% of the time, they know what to do. They cannot solve their own shame and loneliness and emotional regulation. They can solve their own problem. So don't give them the problem thing, give them the emotional thing. And if they want your help, they will ask, particularly in adult relationships. So the solution, the way that we get people out of their habitual wiring, which we're guilty as a society of giving, which is only transactional, not real, is what we call the jab hook exercise. And that, sorry for the bad analogy, but it's essentially all these what we call mistakes, but let's just call them instinctual habits, like problem solving, which is the right hook, the big right hand, I'm going to knock this problem out of the park. Getting them out of shame by talking about yourself, what we call being a thief, sugarcoating it with blind optimism, you know, all these big right hands. We're not saying you can't use those skills. What we're saying is you got to jab first. You have to set up first with a jab. And what the jab is, validation. If you ever throw a right hand without validating first, you fucked it up. Even ChatGPT now knows how to do that. So this is the perfect way to learn how to jab hook. Right now, well, after this very engaged dialogue, open ChatGPT, ask it a question about anything. Like, say, I don't know where my business should be in 5 years and how to incorporate artificial intelligence to make sure I don't fall behind. Can you give me 4 tips to integrate AI into my business, right? That's a pretty practical thing. I promise you, ChatGPT's first response will be, I understand that artificial intelligence is causing some confusion in the market, which will make you feel like you want certainty around this. Here are the tips.
Validation first.
Validate, right hand. So if all we do, even if we're really, really bad at sitting in the emotions, we feel so uncomfortable, we want to eject out of it. If all we do is learn how to jab before we hook, you will like 10x your relationship.
Absolutely. In my therapy room, I think every single day I say I want to tattoo validate on my forehead. Because validate, it is the most important thing you can do for any conversation.
100%.
Even if all you said was, that sounds really tough, and then you were so grossly uncomfortable, you didn't know what else to say, you were just silent. You would make a positive impact.
100%. And people often misinterpret the word validate as agree. It doesn't. Validation is, can you accept that person has a feeling?
I was going to talk about this later, but we're here. So let's talk about it. Let's quickly jump into it. I guess, accepting that someone's reality is their reality is so important in a romantic relationship, but also with your children. I mean, I always think that they basically are one and the same.
Very similar.
But let's touch on that, because so many people, when they're having a conversation, whether it be, you know, helping someone through something tough or an argument, a disagreement, they really struggle with just saying, but I don't agree with that is how you should feel, or that is your view. I mean, I can just talk about that for a long time.
I can clear this up real quick.
Do you want to give your view
cool.
before I give mine?
Here's a rule. You never get a say around the way someone feels, ever. You always get a say around the way someone behaves. That's your rule.
And this is what I say in parenting as well. You can never say that a child is not allowed to feel a particular way, but you have every right to draw your line around how they're allowed to behave with that emotion. And I feel like in romantic relationships, it's very much, because we often just immediately take things as
don't be mad. You shouldn't be upset.
How have I done something wrong? Instead,
personalization.
Totally. If we slow down, and I mean, my biggest tip to all mental health aspects is slow down. You can slow down enough in a conversation with your partner or your friend to say, okay, that is their reality. That is how they feel. And the biggest way that I describe this to clients is, if I have 10 people experience the exact same situation to a T, I would have 10 different reactions. 3 saying, that's surprising, 2 saying that was scary, 1 saying that was so fun, but the situation was exactly the same. But the life they had before the situation is what is different. So that's where it's important to go, that's their experience of what has just happened. Why am I trying to change that? Instead of saying, if me speaking how I just did made you feel scared, that was never my intention, but I want to understand how I can not help you feel that way moving forward. So I guess it's just really, I find personally, validation and accepting that someone's reality is their reality is one of the, if not biggest steps to having a real conversation.
Especially in the context of romance. It is meeting someone on a playing field of understanding before defending. If it's just, you will break up if your instinct is to defend first.
Mm.
You just will.
Mm.
You can set the watch to it. Why? Because there's so much research,
Yeah.
the 4 horsemen that already tell us, or the 1 horseman really, which is what they all ladder to, is contempt.
Yeah.
Contempt is not feeling seen, understood by your partner. So you don't need to say, I agree. And if your partner is coming at you pointing the finger first before getting curious, that's a conversation around boundaries, which is, hey, I want to have this conversation with you. You set positive intention. I want to feel close to you. I want to be your teammate. I find it really hard to do that when the tone or the language is accusatory as the primary lens, as opposed to curious as the primary lens. Is that something that you feel we can work on together? If the answer is yes, great. If the answer is no, you should look whether you have the right fit in a relationship. Does that person have capacity?
The timing as well. Like they might say no because they're really pissed off, and you might say, "Cool,
let's
come back to this."
Person, place, time is a thing, but I more mean like
on a bigger scale. If
is
they
this a
continue to come to the same
thing, and someone isn't having any ability, capacity, or willingness, because they're 2 very different things, capability and willingness, to meet you where you are. And you mentioned before, how do I try and not make you feel that way moving forward? I think that's partly the discussion, but we can't control the way someone feels. So it's, can I commit to the behavior that you're wanting from me, regardless of how you feel? So, for example, my ex-girlfriend and I were having a discussion, and because we were out one night and she said something in front of a group of friends while we were having dinner that wasn't nice, and then kind of got into a bit of a sulky mood, and I made everyone feel uncomfortable because everyone could tell she was like upset with me. And I do not like that. I do not like public drama. It's one of my big red flags. If someone's going at me in front of friends, I'm like, see ya. Like,
bye.
1 strike.
Yeah.
Well, maybe 2 strikes on that, because like, if you didn't know before, now you know, but that's not going to happen again. So I took her aside and I said, hey, I really don't like beefing in front of friends. So next time, please, and blah, blah, blah. Now, she started to cry. She's like, you're making me cry. You're shaming me here. And I'm like, okay, this is your reality. I see you feeling upset, but I can't commit to not pulling you aside next time instead of it being in front of other people, saying how I feel, blah, blah, blah. So the fact that she said, you made me cry, I'm like, no, philosophically, I don't think you can make anyone, cry or feel some way. I think that values-wise, I'm okay with the behavior of pulling you aside and having this conversation. But behaviorally, if I have the willingness and capacity to adjust that in future, which is, would you like me to wait until I get home? Because I can do that. That's now a compromised discussion of
what can
the
we shift
behavior
behaviorally so that you don't result in the same feeling.
But do I agree that I made you cry? No. So I think it's just, can you make sense of their feeling? Then can you have input into the behavior and the way that it affects you? And your agreement to interact with that.
And I think that people kind of listening to this and taking on, like you just said, it's from 30 years or however old the human is that you're interacting with, of their story, their baggage that is making them respond in this way. The more we remember that, the less personal we will take whatever they are saying. The less personal you can take somebody's, I feel sad, I feel this, the more you're actually going to be able to lead with curiosity and go, I wonder where this is coming from.
Bingo.
So saying like, but I feel like this is coming at me, because sometimes when we're emotional, we're not able to say, so in this moment, we're like, you're making me cry or whatever. If we can be a partner or a listener who kind of can in the moment go, this is a personal attack in the moment, but I know that this is not about me.
Mm-hmm.
Game changer.
Yeah, and that comes back to another counterintuitive idea I propose in the book, which is the number one way you can get better at being in relationship to others, an external thing, is get better at being in relationship to yourself. The more regulated you can become, the more you will find your relationships thrive, because you will be talking about energy and pace. You will be able to come into relationship with other people where there is triggers and ruptures and fractures, and hold an energy which is, I'm open to things, to truth, because truth, when you're working with truth, you have a therapeutic experience. I'm open to truths or opinions being discussed without me ejecting into full defense mode from a traumatic reaction.
Yeah.
I might be able to hold this and evolve my operating system because I've built capacity to not be as triggered.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like the number one thing any human being can do is learn how to regulate their nervous system.
100% without a doubt.
But incorporating that into your daily life. And it looks different for every person. Like, you have to figure out what your baseline is, which is a whole nother podcast episode.
Yep.
But, my baseline is, if I eat refined sugar and I don't exercise, I will be so fucking anxious.
Yep.
So my baseline is, I have to move my body every day and I have to minimize refined sugar. Whereas somebody else's baseline might be, they also have to meditate, they also have to do deep belly breathing. Somebody else is like, my husband has to do sweet FA and is just regulated because his childhood was good.
Yeah.
What the fuck's that like?
Yeah.
So figure out yours, and it takes time to do that. It's a conscious choice to do that, but doing it means that you can slow down in conversations, means that you can try and not take things personally and actually lead with curiosity. Which I remember probably one of the first conversations I had with Mitch, which was like 5 years ago. That is literally stuck in my mind when we were talking about the therapy room, lead with curiosity. It's like my tagline that goes with Mitch forever of what he's taught me.
That's a good tagline. I've had worse.
Yeah. Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
But it's so true. You're able to do that and not, straight into gloves up if you try and come from a regulated space.
And I say this as well. I think you prefix this conversation beautifully with, it's not about shaming people for mistakes. I wrote in the book, I'm the least qualified person to write this, even though I have a master's degree in clinical psychology, because I came from disorganized attachment, which is the most gnarly of all of it. I was so bad at regulating, self-regulating. I was so bad at having boundaries. I would go all in and all out. I would move toward conflict as a defensive position instinctually, like in every relationship type. It has been like a full-blown revolution internally for me to get to where I am. So I'm not coming at you. I'm not preaching at you as a theory. I'm coming from someone that has laid this motherfucker brick by brick.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you it's possible.
Yeah. Yeah. Without being a thief, which I want
thieve away, Mick.
to explain a bit more about the different communicators, but same. And this is why I love this podcast, because I want it to not be, I'm just some professional psychologist that's sitting here giving you what you should do. Like, I have the colorful history that meant that my attachment style was fucked, and I was incredibly reactive, and I had zero regulation skills. My poor husband, when we first got together. But your attachment style is not concrete. It is malleable, and 100%. You can change it and you can shift it. Like most things, if you enter it consciously and you want to, you can shift it. And it's also not, it's on a continuum. So you aren't necessarily just anxious or just avoidant. Like, you can move up and down on that continuum based off how much you regulate your nervous system, the partner that you have, their attachment style, etc., etc.
Yep.
Do you want to actually just give a little bit of an insight into the different attachment styles and how they might show up? Maybe that might connect with the different type of communicator that you are, because I feel
absolutely. I'll do it after I talk about what in the book I call the disconnection mistakes, because they kind of have an attachment lens threaded through and they're just a bit more digestible. So step one of real conversations is understanding what a real conversation is. Contrasting it against transactional, understanding that it's helpful when you're in an emotional thing to go real, which means moving from essentially 80% problem solving, 20% listening, to 80% listening, 20% problem solving. And understanding that the objective is to understand someone, not fix them. Okay, cool. So then how do I do that thing? Well, step two is, what are the 5 things I need to do less of? Step 3 is, what are the 5 things I need to do more of, which is essentially the steps in the book. So step 2, 5 things to do less of. Identify which character of disconnection you identify with most. I actually have a quiz on my website that's launching next week. Full new website.
In the show notes.
Please do. And you can come in and find which character you are. We build you a personalized communication plan. I'm actually about to launch a free 5-day boot camp challenge, which is with me directly, 1 hour a day for 5 days. It's usually $10K to get me to speak. I'm going to give it all for free, times 5, so $50K worth of value. And I'm gonna say, here's your personalized communication plan, and then as a group we're going to go through and try and rewire that in 5 days, and you're going to see how much jabbing you can bring into your repertoire, validating. So character number 1 is what we call the magician. And the magician's tendency is to fix everything. They think they can wave a magic wand and make someone's problems go away, which might be true, particularly if you're in business, you've been rewarded and incentivized and compensated for being an achiever. So naturally you use that tool in so many other domains of life, but emotionally it's just not going to pull through because it's actually going to push people away.
It's also a common one for parents.
Yeah.
You're sad, let me fix it.
And to that point, Mick, I think magician tendencies come out the more we care.
Absolutely.
It's easy to meet a stranger on the street and potentially listen and hold space and not give them advice. But when your flesh and blood is coming at you with a 10 out of 10 level of distress problem, you're going to go straight to the source. But the source isn't actually the problem, it's their relationship to it, which is this philosophical debate around, it's not about the seat. It's about the inclusion thing. So if we're not helping them feel loved for the need underneath all that, we're never actually going to, because we're just going to play musical chairs. What a fucking analogy. That was a full circle moment there. That was epic. So I'm loving that. Magician tendencies, let's try and reduce them. And the way that we do that is we don't need to drop the wand. We just need to know that there is another tool available to us. And that's a sequencing thing more than anything. Know if it's primarily an emotional issue, which you need to get better at identifying, put the wand to the side just for a couple of minutes, land them, and then you can pick it back up. Jab hook.
Sorry for those actually that are not
Well, you do boxing. You are like a Muay Thai profesh, so that was good technique. Second thing is the thief. Thief jumps in with a same or a me too straight away. Very common, very understandable, just like the magician, really good intentions. However, we do it to try and say like, no, don't feel exposed and alone out there. Let me bring in myself to show that we're on common ground. But when it happens in the wrong sequence or too much, the thief actually steals the focus and invalidates their experience and makes them feel like they need to take care of you. Prime example, my dad was in a mental health facility last year because he was suicidal, and it was a really big thing. And halfway through his stay, I'm juggling work and that, and I rocked up to a business meeting and someone said, "How are you?" And I said, "Do you want to have a real conversation?" And they said, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, not great, going through some stuff with Dad." And they then spent the next 15 minutes telling me about their dying mother. Now, I get where they were coming from, but at that moment, I don't have the empathy calories to give you. I was hoping that I was about to lean on you. And now you're leaning on me, which is fine, but it's just not if you wanted to be helpful to me, you're not being helpful.
And if you want to have a real conversation, let yours come
emerge.
Out, let yours emerge. And then, like you said, time and place, you can still use those things, but first the jab.
Correct. Yeah. Same in me too. Has a place. It can turn a good, real conversation to a great one when you bring in your lived experience in the right time, right place. But if it's straight away, which we're so guilty of because it's conditioning, but it's just not connecting. It's going to bring you back to a transaction. Third thing is the blind optimist. So a blind optimist sugarcoats or silver lines a situation because we are afraid that if we meet someone in their darkness, that we enhance their darkness. It's not true. I have a rule. You are not allowed to tell someone to look on the bright side until you've earned the right by sitting with them in the darkness first.
Love it.
Similar concept of jab, hook. Jab is, I see your darkness.
Yeah.
What's it like in here?
Yeah.
Before I try and turn on a light and say, go elsewhere. Because moss will grow in the places that we don't expose to, you know, the fresh air. We have to go and meet them in the moss.
Yeah.
So yeah, that also largely is an internal thing. It's not an external thing. It's not that we don't want to see them in pain. It's that because of mirror neurons, meeting them in their pain and not putting a positive spin on it makes us confront our own demons. We feel it with them. So we're like, quick, make it go away. Look at the bright side. But that comes back to nervous system regulation.
Do not use words like at least.
Bingo. Yeah. So blind, I didn't. Thank you, Mick. I forgot my words. So magician words are you should or you shouldn't.
These are things that you shouldn't say.
Thief words are same, me too. Blind optimist words are at least. You know, Brene Brown uses this perfect analogy of someone who has a miscarriage saying, at least, you know, you can get pregnant. And they're like, are you fucking kidding me? I'm grieving a death. Don't tell me to look on the bright side. Fourth one is the helicopter. The helicopter freaks out, freezes up when someone's not okay because that is their love language, is to overburden in care. And this coming more into the attachment style stuff now. This is more of an anxious, preoccupied thing. When our caregivers, or at least the primary caregiver, gave us confused or over-responding reactions to our emotional pain. So if we fell off the bike, it was fucking stage 10, like meltdown. Let me ride the bike for you, as opposed to I'm here, I'm helping you co-regulate, and then seeing you ride your bike again yourself. Emotions scientifically proven to be contagious, up to, I don't know, 3 degrees, I think, of separation. So the choice is to be contagious with calm, not distress. So instead of saying, oh no, we say, oh, that's the upgrade for the helicopter. Oh, this is happening. Not, oh no, this is happening. And then the fifth character type is the ostrich, who buries their head in the sand and speaks more to the dismissive avoidance style, where connection is seen as a threat. It's a threat to independence. And usually because we had a caregiver that neglected our emotional needs. So we've equated that to love. And so whenever intimacy comes up, it's like, well, that's not my bag. I don't want to be involved in your life, because actually it's a fear of vulnerability that's driving that, because they want that vulnerability, but we don't know how to work with it. So the ostrich, you know, says nothing. There is no language for the ostrich, and it's helping them find those words to lean in, even when it's uncomfortable, to go toward the pain. So yeah, step 2 is all about, okay, my attachment style, my caregiver upbringing, no shame to them, because that's not going to get us anywhere. It's a victim mind state. It's going to double down on where we are. Is appreciating why we are the way we are, and then going, okay, if I'm securely attached, it means I have a good balance of me and you. I know how to self-regulate and co-regulate, and I don't swing too far. Then you look at the 3 types of insecure attachment styles, which is anxious preoccupied, i.e., I way over-index on you and not enough me. I am prone to giving up my own needs for other people to a detriment. I don't believe and trust in my ability to regulate. I only co-regulate, and I am a pushover and in my own needs. And I hate that about me. I have resentment that I'm a pushover, you know? I can relate to that. So that's the helicopter prone. How we come back is building more meanness, more trust in my meanness, and learning how to say no and have boundaries without feeling like you're sacrificing, you know, for lack of better terms, emotional suicide but what if I lose that connection? Well, trusting in the process that you don't have to lose it. You just equalize it. You just balance it. On the other side, you've got the dismissive avoidance, like the ostriches, whereby we're trying to get you out of so much meanness and into that seeing people isn't as scary as you think. Being exposed and wearing your heart on your sleeve is actually a healthy, safe thing to do, and that you can do that because right now you're starving yourself of nature's greatest medicine, which is healthy relationships, right? So that's going to help you come into the middle, is reducing your meanness, upping your units. Disorganized is where we swing between both from traumatic experience in childhood, and that is about finding the ability to up your self-regulation and your co-regulation to eventually find yourself in the middle.
Yeah. And I think you mentioned in the book that you have a link for the attachment style quiz. If not, I do, and I'll put that in the
attachmentproject.com. Yeah. Dr. Dan Brown's project. Yeah.
And it's hugely beneficial to know this, not only for yourself and how you respond.
I swear you shouldn't be allowed out of the house without understanding your attachment style. It is playing out in every single moment of your life.
Every single one.
Not just people think attachment style is your partner.
Friendships, at work,
yourself,
your children, everything. But knowing your own is really, really powerful and freeing in so many moments, and understanding your why. Why am I responding like that? Why is this? Why am I feeling like that? But also understanding those who are close to you, understanding theirs is really, really important as well.
Yeah.
I feel just the mentioning of Gottman's love maps, for example, which he says is the foundation for a strong, long-lasting relationship. So the most important thing is your love maps, which essentially just means how much you know the ins and outs of your partner's inner world. So the more detailed that map is, the more you know their love languages, which we'll get into. Hopefully there's way too much to talk about in this book. It's too good. But their attachment style, your own, like the more detailed that is, the more you can do what we talked about before around not taking it personally when someone says, oh, are you going to have one more drink? Instead of going, why are you fucking saying that? You go, oh, it's because of, their dad and da, 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 da. Like, this. So you don't take the personal reaction. You understand their map. So long and the short is understanding your own attachment style and your partners and friends is really, really powerful for healthy communication.
Yeah, it helps with curiosity, I think.
Absolutely. So that is a bit of information about the attachment styles. We'll put how you can find out yours, how they show in some of those communication styles we want to lessen. Let's jump into the tools that we encourage them to use and what will create more real conversations.
Yeah, so the 5-step framework I propose in the book has been shown to boost connection as a skill by up to 400%. We've trained, 200,000 people have had access to the program in its different versions over the last 5 years, particularly with workplaces. I mean, we've trained face-to-face live in workshops, thousands of people. So we have a lot of data to show its efficacy. Considering we don't have a full workshop time period, I'll give you the headlines. So the first is you've got to learn how to set up conversations in the right way, because the setup is kind of make or break, right? And people think it's about checking in and saying, are you okay? And, knowing the exact warning signs. But actually, the number one thing I learned about setting up real conversations is bringing the right energy. Your energy does 100 times more heavy lifting than your words. And so that's coming back to that regulation thing, is that, you got to pick your time and your place. But people are looking for non-verbal cues way more than the English language cues. So you're probably communicating 1,000 things you didn't know. So building self-awareness by going to therapy and stuff like that will help you understand what messages you're putting out to the world at all points in time. We try this exercise in the program where we say, how would your 50 people in your life, what would they describe you as if you were to create a word cloud, and what would be the one word you would want to be described as? And I bet they're different. And the missing difference between those two is real conversations. I see people all the time that, like, their homeostasis, their neutral idle state is this. Like, if they were seen on an elevator, or if they were watching a movie, or if they were in the other side of a Zoom recording, their body's closed down, they're frowning, they're a million miles an hour. That is the energy that you're putting out to the world all day. And you're wondering why someone's not opening up to you because you're saying to the world, don't open up to me.
Yeah.
Without saying it, you know, and that's no shame. It just means you got work to do internally because something isn't vibrating in an easeful way.
Yeah.
And trust me, I get it. Like, I was suicidal for almost 2 decades. But once you go and do the hard work, go toward the pain, have the courage to heal, the energy that you put out to the world is one of peace and love and strength. Don't fuck with me energy is the same as I'm a loving person. You can be both those energies at once, you know? And I hope that I role model that to the world, which is that if you were to interact with me as an employee, as a partner, it is that no one will try and understand you more. No one will give more in terms of care than me.
Yeah.
But I'm also the last person that you're going to want to try and fuck over because I just won't let it happen, you know? And so they can coexist, which I think is secure attachment.
Yeah.
So set it up right. Second is listen better. Listening better is understanding that you're not trying to listen for the facts. You're trying to listen for the meaning. We talk about the pyramid in the book: facts, feelings, meaning.
Yeah.
It's the difference between listening to the problem and listening to the person.
Yeah.
The problem is almost irrelevant. It's not about the seat, how many people were in the office that day. It's about why is that important to them. Meaning. You can know someone for 20 years and they not actually know you because what you talk to them about on the weekend is the football, the scores, not why they like football.
Yeah. Yeah.
You might have gone 20 years going to football together every week, not actually knowing this to them is bonding. It reminds them of their dad. It it makes them feel masculine.
Yeah.
It makes them, who knows? But that's when you get I would fucking do anything for that person level energy because that is true connection. You understand why. Third is you got to know how to handle risk. Safety, the chapter is all about if you're going to get real with someone, don't be scared if it gets really real. You need to know how to triage that information from privacy, from where to go, escalating, and having what I believe the 3 gates to safety protocol that we built there is the most digestible way I've seen in terms of if this, then that type of stuff when you're in someone saying, I want to die, you know? Fourth is knowing how to guide someone toward taking accountability and action steps without telling them what to do, because coaching will lead to a higher compliance of them following through than telling. So how do you end up coaching someone? Well, that's what we go deep into. Stop, start, continue.
Yeah. Giving people the information and then letting them decide what to do with it. Like saying, don't smoke, you shouldn't, it's bad, stop. Or saying, here's all the facts of what it'll do to you, why it'll do it to you.
Yeah, I actually think questions.
Yeah.
What
How
does
does that
smoking
make you
do
feel?
for you?
Like,
What have you tried to quit smoking in the past? What are the conditions in which you feel like you need a cigarette most? What are the conditions you feel like you need a cigarette least? They will get there. They know what they need to do. Good questions will coach the action plan out of them.
Yeah.
And the best part is you can be practical when you're in the action module. The questions are directing them toward action-orientated themes. The questions in the listening sequence have to be non-practical.
Yeah.
Then module 5, ASMR and a cough, is boundaries, which kind of holds it all together. How do you be the right level of involved? How do you not be over-involved to the extent that you're jumping in the train and driving it for them, or under-involved where, you know, you're neglecting your need to be in partnership to someone?
Yeah.
And finding that middle ground is a perpetual dance, but there is a framework and somewhat of a science behind how to make that art work.
Yeah.
So yeah, the essence of those 5 steps is learning how to sit in the mud with someone and inspire them to want to take the step out themselves.
Yeah. My version of sitting in the mud with someone is sit on the feeling bench with them. Don't try and rip them off the bench. Sit next to them, hold their hand. Let them know that you can see that it really fucking sucks and that you're here to hold their hand for as long as they need. And I think it's also teaches people that you believe that they have enough strength to get through this, that they can do this, because you're not solving it for them and pulling them off. You're saying, I know you can do this. The most simple one that I think of is a child having nightmares. You know, a parent saying, well, just get in my bed. I know it comes from the biggest place of love and care, but you're actually giving that child the message that I don't think that you can handle your big scary feelings.
Correct.
I need to rip you out of this bench instead of saying, I'm going to sit with you for a little bit. I know this is scary. I know that it's really overwhelming, and that sucks. You can do things even when you are scared. We don't have to do the thing when we've gotten rid of the feeling.
Correct.
So sit with people, you know. I mean, I feel like this whole time I just keep bringing it back to kids, but
No, it's what your audience will relate to.
But it's also sometimes the easiest way to explain to adults that I see in my therapy room is giving kid examples, because it's so much easier to digest, I guess.
I agree with that. And I think that I think most of the listeners will hear this content and think, intuitively, I know this is right. Even though logically I'm like, what? I can't fix and solve, but what? Intuitively, I know I'm supposed to meet people in their pain, and it's hard, but I can do it.
Yeah.
There's going to be a subsegment of listeners who's like, this is some woke bullshit, rolling around in the feelings. Now, I can say with confidence that that's not true. And the reason is because if you take the most masculine man in the world and you try and give him a solution, he's going to triple down on why he's right. Right? So this works with even the most non-woke people. If you meet them in their feelings and allow them to feel understood and therefore empowered to come up with their own solutions, they're going to feel way more close to you because they're going to feel like, wow, you trust me. And when I don't trust myself, I'll ask for your help. Because I'm way more likely to ask for your help if you're not giving me your help unconsensually all the time. So this is nothing to do with like this new age, like roll around in the feeling stuff. Like I would call myself a centrist quite, politically. And I'm a big fan of knowing when to fucking put on your big boy pants and get into the work and like go toward the pain. But also when it's time to stop being delusional and avoiding the work by staying in the head and the problem solving and actually feel some shit. Because that's how you build nervous system capacity. And the greatest gift you can give to anyone in any moment in your life to build connection is that of meeting them where they are with care.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also think, looking at it as like a woo-woo thing, we're not saying that every response needs to be, how does that make you feel?
Yeah.
It can literally be as simple as saying, fuck, that sounds shit, babe.
Bingo.
Like, you don't have to pretend to be a therapist. And sometimes the couples that I see, when I say, your response can literally be like, that's fucked, he said that.
Yeah.
Like, it can be that. You don't have to look at it as some deep philosophical, like,
that's the validation jab. And for those who are like, yeah, but what if I don't see that as that sucks? So for example, someone's reacting in a way where you're just like, how can you be affected by that? And you can't say, that sucks, that sounds hard. You would call out what you see. I can see that's really got under your skin. Yeah. That's as validating. You don't need to agree. Call out what you see so that they feel understood.
Yeah. And I think that that's a pretty big step when you're listening to someone. I don't want to go into like the details of every step.
Yeah, you got to buy it if you want the detail. Hashtag plug.
Yeah. But I think it's really important when you have heard someone, and you've mentioned this before, you're not listening to respond, you're listening to try and understand deeper meaning. So responding with things, asking more questions, or responding with, even if you want to know the deeper meaning and you don't know that person really well, saying, I really want to understand, why do you think that hurt you so much?
Yeah, bingo. Yes.
Has anything else happened in the past that made you feel that way? Or, so what I'm hearing is, and I think in a relationship or like a romantic one, what I'm hearing is a super powerful sentence. Before you want to respond, it's one of the tools I use to help couples slow down, because what someone said and what you interpreted is usually really fucking different.
Yeah, I think there's stats that it's 87 to 89% different.
So being able to say, what I'm hearing is, you think I don't do enough around the house, or blah, 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 blah. Or, you're having a really tough time because of your locker is your seat's in a different position. Then they might say, well, yeah, but I also think, this and this and this, or I meant this and this and this. Then you can go, oh, okay. So, and I just think having that kind of mirror conversation helps you funnel down into the deeper meaning and slows the conversation down, but also makes somebody feel heard rather than I'm listening. Okay, I get to respond now.
Bingo.
You know?
Yeah. And I think, you know, the beautiful thing is when we understand least, we're invited most to be curious instead of critical.
Absolutely.
Whereas usually when we understand least, it brings up a bit of anger and shame. So then we want to get critical that, oh, you're just wrong, you're different, I'll never understand you. It's like, well, what if that was the most amazing call to be, wow, this is so far outside my sphere of reference or how I would feel or act in the same way. I wonder what's driving this.
Yeah.
Because when you approach the world that everyone is trying their best as just a philosophical schema, and that something is real for someone, even though you might not understand it, it's real for them. If you come in with that schema first, fuck, life is so much better. Relationships are so much easier because you're not permanently in a freaking war zone with someone.
Yeah.
I want to call out, and I tried to call out in the book, is the misunderstanding that a love language is something that you like to, it is what you like to receive, but we often give what we like to receive. And that's where it falls down. In that, say for example, I had this guy in my workshop a couple of years ago, identified that he was having a bit of a hard time with his wife, and he took the afternoon off work because he wanted to do something special to show his wife that he loved her. So he went to the shops, came home, cooked this meal for like 3 or 4 hours. She came home from work, he served it up on the table, and she kind of looked at him and was like, thanks, and started eating. And he's like, what? She's like, well, it's nice that you've done this, but you haven't told me you've loved me for months. So he's giving her acts of service. Why? Because he likes to receive acts of service. That's his love language. It does not matter what your love language is when it comes to giving it. It is only the love language in which they like to receive it. Otherwise, you'll be two ships in the night forever. For me, mine is words of affirmation. In a big way, because it gives me, I think you can go and buy people stuff. I think you can go and do nice things for someone, but you never really know where you sit in their mind unless they say. I'm also a speaker and a writer, so I love words, right? So if someone keeps giving me love by like dropping me pasta every day so that it saves time for me cooking, I'm like, that's nice. But if you send me a message being like, I'm so fucking proud of you and what you've achieved in the last week, you've shown up with this and this, I'll be like, oh my God, I've never felt closer and more seen.
Yeah. And it's the biggest sentence is show someone love how they like to be loved, not how you like to be loved.
Bingo.
Or you will be speaking to different languages.
Yes.
And you will be resentful because you'll say, but I'm giving them so much love.
Yes.
But not in the way that they hear it. And when you change that, you'll probably find that you save a bunch of energy.
Yeah.
And you're way more connected in your relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, you know, people are like, well, how do you know what someone's love language is? Well, there's two ways. A, you ask them to do the quiz.
Yeah.
Or B, you try all 5 and see which one they respond to best.
Yeah. And you can also probably think about how they've been showing you love and kind of go, oh, that's the most common way they show it. It must be.
Correct. Yeah.
So when you're having a tough time in a relationship and not feeling loved, one tool that you can do is go, okay, what's theirs again? Oh, it's acts of service. Okay, they've cleaned the house heaps. They've done this. Okay, so they're screaming, I love you in their language. Okay, that's helpful. It's kind of a nice way to.
And speaking about screaming, I think that's something we touched on earlier is like, how do you communicate your needs in ways that are regulated?
Yep.
And boundaries is super hard to set in regulated ways because maybe our love language isn't being met. So therefore we have contempt. So therefore when we go to set a boundary, it just flies out.
Yeah.
And the saucepan lid pops off and the whole thing goes to shit.
Yeah.
To your words earlier, Mick, slow down. I'm such a believer in that. And so how do you set loving boundaries? And that's what you use in your household, right?
Yeah, because a lot of people see boundaries as a threat and as mean. But I think bringing it back to kids, you know, you can validate then boundary. That's what I define as a loving boundary is you validate someone's emotion, but you can still put in a line. So you might say, oh, it really sucks and I'm going to turn the TV off. But we're having TV free time right now. I see your emotion around what I'm saying, but I'm still going to do it. And I think the biggest thing I say to people is when you put in a boundary, somebody else's reaction to your boundary should not change whether or not you put it in. People are allowed to react however they want emotionally to your boundaries. They're allowed to get sad. They're allowed to be hurt. They're allowed to be confused, but you are allowed to have your boundary. So somebody else's reaction to it shouldn't change whether you do it or not. But I also think that a boundary needs to be something that is 100% in your control. So it can't be, hey, I won't have conversations with you, about my boundaries or whatever it is we're going to be talking about if you start to yell at me or if you start to become critical. Oh, they started to yell at me, so we had a conversation for 2 hours of them yelling at me. They didn't respect my boundary, Michaela, so it is what it is. No, a boundary is 100% in your control. So that means I won't have a conversation with you if X happens. So when X does start to happen, you get up and you leave. Or, you remove yourself from the conversation. Or, even an extreme one, I have people saying, I don't want my mother-in-law to, I don't want my mother-in-law to come over. Yeah. The extreme version, if they don't respect that, is saying when you open the door, I don't want any visitors right now. I know that's really tough, but I'm going to close the door now.
Yeah.
It can be that extreme because it's in your control. If you give it to someone else, it's not a boundary. So the last thing I wanted you to explain, I guess, is how do people deal with the guilt or the hangover, as you describe it in your book, around putting in healthy boundaries or loving boundaries?
Yeah, I think most people who will feel guilt about setting boundaries are on the anxious preoccupied, or actually, speaking of characters, develop 4 boundary characters that you'll identify with. I'll also have a quiz on the website for that by the time this comes out, I think. And people who are over-indexing on the connection, anxious, preoccupied, etc., will feel that guilt more than the dismissive avoidant. In some ways, they need to lower their boundaries. All medicine is poison depending on dosage, right? So I think for the people that feel guilty, knowing that you have permission to set them alleviates a lot of the guilt. Reframing them not as rudeness, but as a healthy part of honoring self and other, and an essential way to be human, will clear up a lot of gunk, right? Then you have the practical. I think the simplest way for me that really helped understand boundaries, and you're exactly right that it is a accountable lens, because the non-accountable lens is a rule, which are appropriate in certain relationships with children, for example, but then not appropriate in what we call horizontally orientated relationships, unless your safety is being threatened. So you can or you can't isn't something you would say to someone unless it is mission critical or it's in a vertical relationship. So a boundary, therefore, is what you're going to do to keep yourself safe. So a game-changing sentence to me was when I stopped saying you need to X and Y, and I started saying if you X, I will Y. And that was the difference between disorganized, conflict-prone, insecure Mitch to very secure, peace first, curiosity first, and self-respect first.
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks, Mama Mick.
I love it, and for giving this incredibly useful information. I will have all those links in the show notes and also the link to Mitch's book. I highly recommend it. I really, really enjoyed reading it from not only just a human to human kind of experience, but as a therapist, I loved it and will definitely be passing it on to a lot of my clients. But thank you for your time today.
My absolute pleasure. And by the time this comes out, we should have our first boot camp on the website ready for registration. So mitchwallis.com, Wallis with an I-S, not an A-C-E, where you can sign up for that. And that is completely free. But yeah, you're doing amazing work and you've built such a good community. And you embody the energy of what it means to have a psychologically safe, real conversation.
That's beautiful.
So thank you for offering that to me today.
Thank you so much.